Hi there. This is James Valvis. At least until Edgar Allan Poe takes over my body and transforms me into a genius. I'm hoping that happens soon. But right now, I just want to talk a little bit about the channel and what I've decided. Because I want to move most of my stuff to the Valvlog stuff. And when I mean most of my stuff, I mean all my opinion, all my commentary, and all of that. But I didn't want to give up Poe entirely, partially because I think Poe is completely underrated as a writer anymore, and I want to, as much as possible, bring him back to the fore of thought. I mean, I got 20 viewers per video, so it's not gonna do a whole lot. But I really do love Poe, and I would like to keep championing his work as much as possible. And so what I'm going to do is keep the Poepinions going, but only in those times when I'm giving commentary about literary stuff. And so this is going to be an opinion piece based on literary stuff, even though it seems like it's more global than that, and in some ways it is. But basically, I'm going to be talking about literary stuff. And so that's going to be that. The Val vlogs are going to be just about everything else, and then there'll be the poems and the other stuff. So that's just an update. And now I'm going to hand the microphone over to Mr. Poe, and we're going to talk a little bit about holding on to the courage of one's convictions. Okay. Now, I'm a literary writer. I love the literary arts. I have spent my entire life in the literary arts. I published my first poem when I was 22, but the first poem I wrote that was publishable, in other words, I wrote the poem and eventually it was published, I was 16. I have been writing short stories since the second grade. There was really not a time in my life when I didn't think in stories, or I didn't think creatively in that way. I was probably composing stories well before the second grade. I just didn't have the ability to put them down on paper. In the second grade, I wrote my first short story. It was called Valentine's Beach, and that story blew my teacher away. Absolutely blew her away, because I was not a good student. I was a bad student. And my teacher was not overly fond of me. And yet she had given this assignment to write a story about Valentine's Day. And everybody wrote about how they loved their moms, or they loved their, some secretly loved some other kid or whatever. But I took a different approach, and I went and put the main character on a beach in which he dreamed an entire life with the girl that he was in love with in second grade. Her name was Jo Angelino. I've talked about her before, and I didn't say that in the story, but that's who the girl was based on. And this she was a nun, and it blew her away. She's absolutely stunned. In the sixth grade, my teacher, Mr. Gordon, by then I was already considered a far better student. I was in the public schools by then. I was no longer in Catholic school, and I was dealing with a much less accomplished student around me. And the student, the teacher kept a folder on his desk for stories that I would write. And I would write these stories, and there would be horrible stories about my dad beating me, and I just imagine his teacher reading this stuff. And I put, this is fiction on the top of the page, and then I'd go on and just give complete autobiography of my dad beating the crap out of me. and he'd read this stuff, and he was a saint of a man. He was really a really good guy. And he knew what I was facing out there, and living in the ghetto and I was a minority in my class, and most of the kids were black, Puerto Rican. They came from the projects of Curry Woods, and they they were violent. They were completely. Some of them were just absolutely feral. There's just no getting around it. They had no parental, instruction. They had no care in the world for consequences. They just pretty much did what they wanted to do, and they were angry. They were angry at white people, and there was this weak little white boy there. And so I would write these stories, and I would put them in his little thing, and this would continue on for a long time. In the 7th grade, I was writing short stories. I wrote a short story about a man who finds a picture and falls in love with it. I didn't know that this had been done many times, but I wrote that short story. I wrote a short story in which a young person went into, and I still have it. It's one of the few juvenilia I still have, where a kid, in order to join a gang, went up to the top of. He had to go to the top of a building and scream a racial slur, according to the top of Curry Woods, the projects, and he had to do this on each floor, scream a racial slur, and make it all the way down and survive. Obviously, this is it was based on something I heard that was a gang initiation at the time, where they had people do this, and if you survived, if you got out of the building alive, you could be in the gang. Now, I don't know if this was really true, but I wrote a story based on it because it seemed interesting to me, not because it was white power or anything like that. It was just I just thought this was an interesting thing to write about. Somebody would have to do this, and whether you would survive or not. I don't think that you would, by the way. I think that if you went up and screaming racial slurs at the top of your lungs in each floor of Curry Woods, somebody to come out and put a couple of bullets in your gullet, and that would have been that. But so I don't know that ever really happened. I just know that was a rumor, that it was a certain gang initiation. And so, when I was turned 16, or I was like 15, I think it was 15, I went to Boston with my friends at St. Peter's Prep, and there was a kid there, Marco DiGirolamo, still remember his name, he was a great kid, but we weren't that close, but we were friendly, and he was writing poems that rhymed, and I just thought it was just terrific. He read a couple of them to me, and one of them was, I'll never forget, it was Ode to Mr. McGinnis, and he went to, it was all about killing our geometry teacher. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's really what it was, and it was so clever, and he was like blasting holes in him, or whatever he was doing, and I don't remember the poem, but I remember being just absolutely blown away by the cleverness of it. And I thought, wow, I should write poetry too. So I went home and thought about this, and thought about how I would write poetry, and I didn't get to it till that summer. And I was sitting in my dad's car, and we just had an argument, me and my stepfather. And I wrote this poem, this really bleak poem about him, and that just I've been writing about him ever since, really. So the first poem was about my dad, and so I've been doing this a long, long time. It's always been a part of my life, and I love it. I love it to death. I love everything about the literary arts. I really do. I love the people who do it. I love the product that they produce, and I love the whole scene of it. I love what you learn from it, and I love what you don't learn from it, and I love the feeling that you get when you produce it, and you're producing it well. At least for you. Well, it's a high that I can't explain unless you've really been in that place where you're creating something in a certain flow, and it's coming out pure and clean, and you know it. That's the best. That's absolutely the best thing. That it's the biggest high. I mean, there have been moments when I've had maybe sexual experiences and other kinds of experiences that could equal that, but they're not, your standard ordinary sex that you have here or there. No, not really. Not when you're hitting that high note in the literary world, in literary stuff. That's just incredibly wonderful. And so believe me when I tell you that, I've dedicated my entire life, starting from when I was a very young child, up until today, literally a couple of minutes ago, I have been thinking, acting, or performing, or working on writing in the literary arts all that time. There is never a day that goes by I don't think about it. There's never a time I don't work on it. There's never anything I do more than it. I mean, really my life breaks down into like 3 or 4 parts. I mean, there's basic maintenance in life. You got to shower, you got to go to the bathroom, you got to cook and you got to eat, that kind of thing. There's family time for me, which is important to me. There's some leisure time. You got to have that. Throw in the maintenance. There's got to be some exercise in there, and then writing. And let me tell you, there have been times in my life where the writing has been the biggest part of that, especially those times when I didn't have family. And so, I would go, when I was in the Army, I basically did 2 things. I worked and I wrote. That was it. I'd go out and party with my friends every now and then, but it was mostly I worked and I wrote. Even when my friends were out at the NCO club drinking, I still remember I would be typing the poem. I would get done with the poem. I would look at it. It was usually not very good. I'd shake my head. I'd go to the window, and my friends would be going in and out of the NCO club, having a good time. This has been my whole life, my whole dedication. And the reason I'm bringing this up, the reason I've gone onto this 10-minute tirade about how much I've dedicated my life to this craft, well, I'll get to that in a minute, because I want to talk about this too. When I picked up writing again in 2009, because I had stopped smoking and found I couldn't write when I didn't smoke. The reason I smoked so long is because I could never write without smoking. They were connected to me in my brain. So when I picked it up and I said, I'm going to try one more time to be a writer. I'm going to try one more time. And if I don't do it, then I don't do it. If I don't have any success at it, I'll just quit. And I'll just go do something else. I don't know what. I'll be 40 years old, but I guess I can maybe, get a degree and have a few years teaching or something. I don't know, something else. And what I did was, I worked at it, but I was working at it with the idea in mind that I would be a success and that I could do things for my wife, especially take her on a vacation. That was my initial goal, was just make enough money to take my wife on a decent vacation. And it seems a very pathetic goal in life, but that's what I wanted to do. Just make like $5,000 and I could take her to London. That's all I wanted. It was really, small potatoes. I mean, $5,000. You work at Burger King for 6 months, you'd have more than enough, But I wanted to do it through writing because I wanted to be a writer. That was my dream since I was a baby. And so just wanted to be successful enough for that. Okay? And so I joined a bunch of social media, including Facebook. I'd not been on Facebook before that, even though it was already very popular with people. I'd not been on any other kind of social media, Twitter and the rest of it. I had a journal at some point, and it was very popular. But I didn't make any money from it. I didn't sell any literary stuff from it. A lot of people came and read it, and there were, literally thousands and thousands of visitors. But there was no profit in it at the time. And then I eventually lost that whole reading public, and they went on their own way. And I just stopped writing for a long time. And so, when I came back, there was nothing. And so eventually I went onto Facebook and I went onto social media and I started promoting my writing in ways that were kind of shocking to some people, because I would talk about how I would write every day, or I would read every day large numbers of poetry or large numbers of literature. I would read it, or I'd write a lot, and I'd get a lot of backlash. Who is this guy who's never published anything, who's saying, you should write every day, and you should, go out and, read 20 poems a day, every day. What the heck is he talking about, Shouldn't it be quality over quantity? I get that a lot. Shouldn't it be quality over quantity? And I'd be like, no, and a couple of times more, no. The quality comes from the quantity. You can't have one without the other. There's very few writers in literary history that I can point to that wrote very little and yet wrote very well. Very few writers like that. I mean, you have some writers who wrote very little because, take a John Keats or something, but they died young. They didn't have the time to accumulate a large body of work because they died so young, or they started so late and then they died. But the number of people who wrote over a span of decades and did not produce a great wealth of material, very, very few. In fact, I should do a Poepinion on that. I should do just talk about why it's important to write a lot. I actually wrote a whole nonfiction book on it, which I've never released to the public, but I will eventually, about why writing more is better. Anyway, let's come back to why I'm saying all this. So I'm building up this audience, and I had quite a few people following me, and they're excited about this new writer who was publishing widely and well, and I was getting nominated for Best of the Net and the Pushcart Prize, and I was achieving greater and greater levels of literary accomplishment, and more people were coming in. They were saying what a great guy I was, great, and I am a pretty nice guy. I'm a nice guy. Most people have who deal with me on a one-to-one basis usually generally like me. If I don't talk about politics, or I don't talk about religion, I don't talk about the stressful stuff, then generally speaking, people like me. I mean, it's been almost universal. But all this time that I was building up this audience, and I was talking about things that were mostly literary, and I put jokes out there and things of that sort, and they were very surface level stuff. The whole time, I'm watching I didn't have this kind of level of contact with the literary world. And the literary world is monolithically progressive. It's not just progressive in a they lean left either. I mean, these people are hardcore leftists. Some of them are radical leftists. Some of them are violent radical leftists. Some of the people want violent overthrow of the government. Some of the people spell America with a KKK. Some of the people think that this country is like the worst thing that ever happened to the world. Some of the people think that, men are just horrible human beings, and if you don't buy into that, if you don't say that men have been garbage throughout all of history, and that every man was, stepped on the throat of every woman throughout history, then you hate women. The only way to really get along in the world is to just kind of either be silent about it or just agree with the whole line. And so I wasn't agreeing with the whole line, but I was generally being silent about it. I was not saying anything because it didn't fit my goals to do that. My goals were to be a literary writer, to share my literary works, to get my wife for that London vacation, and that was it. It wasn't to be a political agitator. To this day, I don't want to be a political agitator. I have political opinions. I keep myself informed of the current world and stage, but that's not what I do. I tend to think of that as bottom of the birdcage stuff. You talk about politics. It's just, unless you're talking about the higher philosophical ideas of politics. Generally, when you're talking about the this Trump did this or Clinton did that, or the daily blow by blow garbage, to me it seems like paying attention to a football game's play, and you look at that play and you're all excited about that play, and yet it's really, even if it's a great play or an important play in the game, it doesn't determine who wins it, not usually. So I tend to think of that stuff as just banal. and not very important, and not something I really even care to do, because I like to deal in eternal things. I'm a literary guy. Literary guys care about humanity. Literary people care about the eternal. The when you read Hamlet, you don't think, well, I mean, certain people do because they make everything political now. But when you read Hamlet, you should be able to see that in everybody. Hamlet is everybody. It's not Republicans and Democrats, not blacks and whites, not men and women. Hamlet is everybody. You read Hamlet, you look at Hamlet, you study Hamlet, you see what he says, and it is you, it is your wife, it is your daughter. Everybody is Hamlet, and everybody's Ophelia. And everybody, alas, is poor Yorick. Everybody is Lear. Everybody is Lear's kids. Everybody is Antigone. Everybody is Oedipus, and on and on. There is no politics in that, not really. But as I was going along and just doing my thing and writing my little poems and getting them published in better and better places and having people say what a wonderful guy I am, and they did. A lot of these people really were, quite pleased with me. They thought I was a great guy. I knew the whole time I'm listening there and I'm gritting my teeth, reading what these people are saying about anybody who disagrees with them. And what they were saying was horrendous, was horrible. It was not in any way what I would consider a liberal attitude toward the world. In a liberal attitude toward the world, the very first thing you do is you give the other guy the benefit of the doubt. Now, he can lose that benefit of the doubt if he's bad enough. If he's horrible enough person, he can lose it. Guy's going around raping little children. Yeah, you're going to lose the benefit of the doubt. Sorry, But generally speaking, the liberal mindset says, the very word liberal gives it away. You have a liberality toward things that you disagree with. There's a certain I have standards, but those standards are not very, very tightly drawn. To be very tightly drawn is to be, I don't want to use the word conservative. It's much more like authoritarian. Because conservative in American sense is not authoritarian. It means something else in the American sense. But in this sense, the progressives are not liberal. They're not liberal. They are authoritarian in their mindset. And they have tightly drawn those things that they will listen to, that they will accept. And if you don't fit within those lines, you become horrible. I mean, Hillary Clinton was pretty clear about how she feels about anybody who did not fit in her tiny little Overton window. And she said it. You're deplorable. You're irredeemable. You're a bad person. If you think that, the border should be more secure than it is, then you're a xenophobe. It's not that you worry about terrorism or something else, or crime, or just, children being, abused or sold into sex slavery, or any of the number of problems that could come with a open border. There's nothing, none of that stuff is possible. You are a xenophobe. You just hate people with darker skin than you. Or, if you happen to have darker skin yourself, then you're some kind of race traitor or something else. They always find the least charitable view of anyone they disagree with, in every instance. And so I was dealing with that kind of realization that these people that I always thought so highly of, the people I love, my people, the literary people, the people who have, it was hard for me to even get my head around it, because you would think that wide reading of literature would make a person more liberal. But it doesn't really happen that way. What happens is they become more accepting of those who agree with them and less accepting of those who don't. They become more tribal. Now, you wouldn't think that that's the case. You would think that when you're reading these great works, that they would turn the key of your heart and make you see that to some degree we're all connected. We're all stuck in the same existential situation, and we're all trying to get by as best we can. And then unless somebody is really, doing horrendous stuff, that we should generally be kind to them. We should generally try to see where their point of view is and why they're thinking that way. I'll give you an example. Abortion. Now, I happen to think abortion is the greatest human tragedy since the Holocaust. I think not since the Holocaust, ever. If you believe, as I do, that children in the womb are human beings, then I don't see how you can think of abortion as anything worse than the worst crime ever perpetuated by man. Because it's just killed billions of people. I mean, billions. Nothing else is close to it. Not even communism, which killed like 100 million people. Communism is like, a starter genocide compared to abortion. It's just horrendous. And what's even makes it even worse is that mothers have largely done it to themselves. Or, the fathers have forced the mothers into it, as happens a lot of times. Or the grandparents have forced the daughter into it because they don't want their daughter to not go to college or something. And so while all this was going on, and while I was seeing, this increased authoritarian what I feel is anti-literary mindset within the literary world, I kept biting my tongue. I kept saying nothing because I knew what it would mean to say something. If you say something, then you're going to lose friends. And if you lose friends, especially if they're powerful friends, you lose the chance to be a success. And I want to be a success. I still want to be a success. I want to be a success for, especially for the sake of my family, my wife, the people who, my in-laws, people, my brother, people who put a lot of effort into my well-being and my success, and put a lot of effort into that. I feel it's a cross I carry. When somebody else is busting their butt so that you could be a writer, and you're not coming off, you're not succeeding, that weighs on you. And so you feel this great burden about it. At least I do. And and especially since it's not like I'm striving to be Stephen King or Charles Dickens or William Shakespeare or something stratospheric. I'm just trying to just make a few bucks, just trying to just be maybe publish a novel or two, or just put out there enough poetry that people will become patrons for my channel, or something that earns a little respect in the world. So to speak up against this, knowing what it would mean, knowing it would mean maybe the end of my dream, maybe forever, that no matter how well I wrote, if I stood up and said, no, it's wrong, Trump did not mock a disabled reporter. He didn't do it. It's a lie. It's false. If I stand up and do something like that, then I know the result of that. It's probably a 99% sure that you're destroying yourself. And I weighed this, and I've been weighing it for a long time now. I've been sitting around saying, you're destroying yourself, Jim. You're destroying your career. You're destroying all the hard work that you've put in. And I've put in thousands and thousands of hours into literary work. Thousands and thousands of hours. And so have other people to help me. And in order to stand up and say truths that nobody's going to buy anyway, Nobody's gonna stand. It's my pussycat. Nobody. She's like worried. she's like, oh no, he's upset. No, I'm not upset. I'm fine. But to put yourself out there and to say these things, that the people who have the wield the hands power within the literary world, and to stand up for people who are being lied about. Stand up. I've stood up for other writers who have been abused or mistreated by mobs who have gone after them. And in other ways, to make myself a pariah. There's two people, I think really maybe just even one or two people who come and put a dislike on every single video I make. Now think about that. I'm nobody. I don't have any following. But they take a time out of their day every day to come here and thumb down a video. Every single day. That's dedication. I don't have a fan who's that dedicated. I mean, Matt Borson, who, God bless him, comments on just about everything I do, is not as dedicated to me as a fan than this person, whoever they are. They will come for every single thing and downvote everything. They don't comment, they don't say it, but they go, they're completely dedicated. And that's the kind of thing, when I opened up and I decided that I would stand up for what I believe in, that I would give up everything that I ever worked for to stand up for what's right, I took that leap. And I've been taking that leap daily for a long time now, for a few years now. And what I've seen is exactly what I expected. All those friends that I had, many of those friends I had, not all of them, there are a few that remain, but almost all those friends that I had are gone. I've been befriended by literally hundreds of people who were friendly toward me because I said an unpopular thing that flattered their vanity. Mostly it flatters their vanity. And I've done this at great expense to myself over and over again. To the point where now, just to get people to watch, 10 people to watch a video like this, when I used to have hundreds of people would like my stuff. Not anymore. I walked off the path. And the question is, do I regret it? And the answer is, a little. If I'm going to be honest, a little bit. Because you can stand up here and say, I'm the best. I did everything, that a noble person would do, and I was courageous, and I stood up for what was right, and I stood up for the truth. Well, that's probably true. But I also undid a lot of work that a lot of other people did, good people. I may never get to take my wife on that vacation. I may never get a single Patreon dollar because I did that. I may never get, more than one or two comments on a video. I may never get a book published that I would have gotten published. I may never win a pushcart prize that I might have won. I may have never, win a poetry award that I might have gotten. That I've been able to succeed as much as I have, despite the headwinds that come with me taking these stands, is a real testament, not only to my talent, but to my, to the ability, to the vastness of the poetry world. Because I think in some ways, had the people known that I had these opinions, I might not have ever gotten any success at all. I might have been completely locked out. And so, what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that there's a cost to being good. There is. It's a powerful thing. It's a hard thing. But you can't really even claim to be good unless there's a cost. A lot of times you see these virtue signalers going around and they say, I'm all for, the children at the border. And it doesn't cost, you typed a few lines on Facebook. Well, great for you. Great for you. Nobody's gonna not publish you because of that. Nobody, it doesn't cost you any money. You didn't have to lose a limb or something like that. Like I risked my life for our freedoms when I joined the military. It doesn't cost you anything. And really, can you claim to be a good person unless it costs you something? And can you claim to be a really good person unless you're willing to put it all on the line for what's right? I don't know. I once had a friend who, and he's actually still a Facebook friend. We don't talk much anymore. But I got in trouble on a fiction website. And I said to him, why haven't you defended me? You know who I am. You know I'm a good guy. Why aren't you defending me? And he said, well, I'm not that kind of friend. I'm a different kind of friend. And I thought, yeah, you're the different kind of friend who isn't a friend at all. And so, if you want, I look at saints. I look at the people who have really, the martyrs, the great martyrs of Christianity, and I think, Valvis, people people went to the lions, and they were burned alive, and they were speared through, and they were crucified upside down, and you really got no complaints. You live a great life. You have the best wife in the world. You have a daughter that you adore. You have a cat that's, well, let's just say I got a cat. And my life is just awesome. It's just everything, just about everything I ever wanted it to be. And if you don't get to take your wife to London because you stood up for what's right, well, that's not the end of the world. That's a tragedy I can live with. But man, it doesn't seem like it ought to be that. Do you really want people to lie to you? Is that what you really want? Because that's really the two options, isn't it? Either people are going to be open and honest with you, or they're going to hide who they are and what they think, because that's the only way they can remain friends with you. That's the only way they can remain in your circle. That's the only way they can get you to click a like on a poetry link. Is that the kind of world that we want to have? And is that really even a friendship? Is it even a friendship when people have to watch everything they say lest they offend? Anyway, it's Edgar Allan Poe giving Jim Valvis his body back and his mind back. Suspect that it is. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this talk. Thank you for listening. In future, because we're already at the end here, but in future things, if you want to just blow through one of my talks and you think, wow, 40 minutes is a long time, you can hit that little flower thing there and speed up the time 1.5 or two times. I'll sound a little bit like a chipmunk, but you can get through this talk in 20 minutes or half the time. Anyway, thank you for listening. I do appreciate it very much. You have no idea how much. And God bless you.